So today I'm speaking with Lisa B.R.A.V.O, author, speaker, and highly acclaimed psychotherapist. Do I have that right?
Yes,
Oh,
correct.
great. So
hmm
thank you for coming and speaking with me, Lisa. Can you tell me how you got into your work? And we're jumping right in, and tell us about the B.R.A.V.O effect. What is that about?
Okay. So I started working with teenagers really after I had a pretty significant teenage life myself. I was a very rebellious teenager, got into a lot of trouble, had very traditional parents who were doing the best they could with the tools they had. But I think I needed power tools and they didn't have them. So I think that was part of it. As I got older, I realized that it would have been incredibly helpful for me as a teenager to have had another adult that wasn't maybe necessarily my parents to have as a sounding board, because I was not getting the best advice from my girlfriends, which is what teenagers usually default to, right?
Yes.
So I started working with teenagers and realized that I understood them in a certain way that maybe their parents didn't understand. And I was able to sort of be a conduit between parents and their teenagers. And what I found throughout all of the time that I've been working in private practice with families is all of these families share a common thread. And that thread is that the teenager is trying desperately to figure out how to connect with their parent, and the parent is trying to figure out how to connect with their teenager. But because the rules have changed so much and the sort of the game has changed so much between parents and teenagers, it takes us as I think as parents a little time to catch up and acclimate to all of the changes that happen with our teenagers. So part of what I realized is really at the core is about creating a really healthy connection between that teenager and parent. So the B.R.A.V.O effect was kind of born out of a need for having a blueprint for parents where they could navigate what's going on with their teenagers. And the way I have the book sort of broken up is B.R.A.V.O is an acronym. It's also my last name, but it's an acronym for this framework that I use when I work with families. Mm-hmm. And that the word B.R.A.V.O stands for behavior, relationships, attitudes, values, and opportunities. And when I work with teenagers and families, I have them first look at the behavior, because the behavior is what gets our attention, right? It gets us stopped in our tracks and it gets us paying attention in a much different way, right? Yes. But the behavior is just kind of the sounding alarm for a lot of other things. So if we can understand the behavior's gotten our attention, now what's going on in our relationship with that teenager? What's going on in their relationship with themselves? What's going on in our parental relationship? Are we having our own triggers that are coming up from our own parenting? All of us, as parents, we do sort of fly blind unless we've learned other skills. So we always default to how we were parented unless we have some other skills that we've learned along the way. So then there's that relationship piece. What is the attitude? That's the next one. What attitude am I holding about my child's behavior right now, or my relationship with my child? What is their attitude towards me? What is their attitude towards their peers or whoever they've just gotten into trouble with? What's going on in terms of the attitude that they're holding? And then what are they valuing in that moment? Lots of times we can look at kids who've been in trouble and we can assume the worst, right? We can assume they were lying or being disrespectful or being whatever we believe, right? But really sometimes if we dig deeper and we understand how they were motivated in that moment, what was driving them in that moment, we might understand that they're valuing something like loyalty to a friend. on the surface, it may look like, sheer disrespect for an adult. But if we look at it from their viewpoint, sometimes they are holding a value. And it's important for us to be able to decipher what's going on there. And then the last piece is opportunity, which I think is probably my favorite part of this entire framework, because I believe there's opportunity in every moment with our teenagers, from the most difficult moments, the most challenging moments, to the smallest moments where we are just sitting there and being with them. There's always an opportunity to create change and connection with that teenager. And if we look at things in terms of what's the opportunity before we open our mouths, we may create a much different scenario for that day or that moment with our teen.
Mm-hmm. Wow, I like that. Bravo. Oh, that's very good. I wanted to start off with that behavior, because that behavior is a trigger for not just the teenager, but for the parent. And I really like how you cascade it down. And I think if the relationship, depending on the relationship, the reaction to that behavior is going to be different, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I like to think of behavior with parents. Lots of times as parents, we're doing the best we can, right? And so we're in a moment with our teenager and we're trying to manage it in the best way we can. The problem is that we become reactive to their behavior instead of being responsive. So there's a very big difference between response and reaction.
Yes.
When we're reacting, we're in our limbic system. We're in the part of our brain that's fight, flee, or freeze. And we are just, ready for, the lion to jump out from behind the couch and get us, right? So all of our instincts are to protect, to fight, to run away. And so when that's happening for us, it's very difficult to make an informed decision about how we're going to handle the moment, right?
Yes.
But when we're responsive, we're in a different part of our brain, the part of our brain, our front temporal lobes, that help us think logically and think about what's going on. And as parents, if we could just even take a 10-minute pause, or just go to the bathroom. That's my favorite place. That's my reset. I'm like, I'm going to go to the bathroom. I'll be back. They don't need to know I'm not going to the bathroom. I just need to get myself calmed down and get myself to a place where I feel like I'm going to manage the next moment in the most optimal way.
Yes.
And in order to do that, I need to get out of the situation and take a minute, get back in my own body, figure out what's going on for me. Maybe compartmentalize. Sometimes teenagers can say they know exactly what to say to get our blood pumping, don't they? They know exactly what to say to get us off the phone, to get them to get us in their face, to get us to stop what we're doing. They've studied us since they were born, right? So they know what gets us ticking. And so I think with teenagers, they can be very accurate and precise in getting us to react to them.
Yes.
And so part of our job is to understand that that's how they're getting this like very quick connection, but it's not a healthy connection. It's connection, but it's not healthy. So really getting us to the point where we aren't going to be reacting in that frantic way with them. We're not going to interact with them when they're in that space, but we are going to show up when they're calm and ready to talk about it with us. And that's when we come back out of the bathroom and say, okay, I have taken a deep breath and I'm calm now. And I would like to talk to you about what just happened. And what we're doing in that moment is twofold. We are self-managing so that we can be responsive versus reactive, right? But we are also modeling for our teenager how to handle distress. Lots of times we think we're teaching stress management to our teenagers when we're yelling and screaming at them to calm down. That's not when they learn it, right? That's not at all when they learn it. That's how they learn to manage their own distress.
Yes.
And then we get upset with them when they're yelling and screaming. Now you've raised 3 boys, right? Boys can get very scary when they're teenagers and they're all of a sudden bigger than us and they puff up and their hearts are still little children, but their bodies are like men. And we're trying to figure out how to manage that moment. It can be very scary.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You saying that just brought me back to a couple of times. Now, I have 15 years between my first child and my second child. And so with my first child, I was very, this old timey, don't talk to me like that kind of woman, So,
right.
He got the hard end of the stick, literally, when he got mouthy with me, right? Because I'm a single mom. You don't understand this, right?
No getting out of line, right?
And then the two youngest now, they get the, tread softly type thing. So I went from being this awful mom that my son was scared to be rude to this lame person who just went along with everything. And there has to be a middle ground. And, what's that middle ground?
Well, I think that's a great question. And I think part of it is, and I don't know what your background is as a parent, but I think lots of times what we do is if we were parented harshly, we tend to overcorrect and then we're too lenient. And if we were raised in a home there weren't enough rules and there wasn't enough structure and we felt unsafe because of that, we tend to overcorrect and be very strict. So our default settings sort of change, and also probably as we age, our default settings change a little bit because we're in a different place as parents. When with your first child, you were considerably younger than you were with your second child. So we have life experience and wisdom that we didn't have the first time around. And I think understanding all of that's really important. And it also comes down to just, in understanding how to read the moment. If what you're doing as a parent isn't working, then maybe it's time to not do that anymore. Maybe it's time to decide, you know what, every time I smack you on the back of the head and I get what I want in that moment, that doesn't mean that that's a cumulative response that you're going to get. Yeah. Usually what it means is, and having raised a teenage boy, I know this firsthand, is if we teach, if we're physical, and that's how we respond to our own distress with our children when they're young, when they get physical with us, it can be very scary, especially for single parents, right? Because you don't have anyone to kind of bounce things off of. And you're the only parent. So they really it's very developmentally appropriate for teenagers at this age to really challenge what you're saying and to challenge you, but they're not quite, they're not quite equipped to have the impulse control and the distress tolerance and the emotional regulation that we expect them to have. So, what I would say is if you find yourself kind of doing that pendulum between all or nothing parenting, it's really important to start doing some reading and really, get some books that really kind of complement your parenting style. I don't think it's useful to have, to find the guru of the moment if it doesn't resonate with you. It has to be really how you parent and really needs to echo your philosophy about child rearing. And then, really educate yourself. If you were raised in a family where you didn't have this kind of structure or this parenting role modeling, then you're not going to know how to do it. And when things get rough, that's when we default to some of the more extreme ways that we were parented.
Right. Good thing. Where were you 10 years ago? 20 years ago? Oh, wow. That's something, I really like to have these conversations, because I think that we sometimes struggle so much with the basics that these things just get slipped through the crack, and before you know it, they're adults and it's too late to do anything. So I'm really hoping this conversation will help someone, and I'm so happy you came.
I also, though, would like to add, Jennifer, I think, I have lots of parents that come to me. I kind of feel, when I used to do parent training, I would call this the uh-oh that's followed by there's always an uh-oh that follows the aha. You have your aha moment and then you go, uh-oh, like, oh, if I just had this 10 years ago, right? We just would start kicking ourselves right away. And the truth is, I believe that there is always an opportunity to connect with our children, no matter how bleak it may seem, because no matter what, at the end of the day, you are still the parent. And they still have this deep and profound need to connect with you. It's a core wound. And I wouldn't say that. I have people who come to see me for individual counseling and their hearts are broken because of their relationships with their parents or their relationships with their children. And and I also know there's this yearning that happens. I mean, it's not a bond that you ever can really cut. I mean, there's people who don't speak to their parents, but they think about them every single day, and their whole life is wrapped around trying to understand what happened in that relationship. So I think there's always an opportunity for connection. There's always an opportunity to change course, and there's always an opportunity to create relationship that's connected with no matter what's happened prior to that.
Yes, that's true. I keep getting the urge to tell this story. I'm going to make it short because I'm hoping that this helps. So I have this son. He's trained in the military, and he was going through some things, and he had a knife. And he's 6'2", and I'm 5'5", and he's angry and upset. And I walked up to him and said, "Put the knife down." And I was like this. So, I was scared.
Yeah.
And he just put the knife down. And I've thought about that a lot of times. I realized that happened because, and my youngest son said it, he listens to you. Right? And that's where your R comes in, is that he's in trouble, and that could have gone a lot of ways, right?
Yes, it could have. We read about it in the news every day, don't we?
Yes. And I may get in trouble for repeating this story, but, I just hope that, we can emphasize that relationship part to build that, no matter, what things are like.
Right. And having that relationship and that connection with you is what helped him believe he could trust you in that moment.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And our lives can change in a moment too.
Yes.
So we really have to remember it, every moment brings the opportunity.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think even if I love that story because I think it's not an unusual story. I think that lots of times when kids are acting out in violent ways, it's not because they're violent people. It's because they're hurting deeply at their core.
Yeah. And
if you can address that with them in that very moment and just say, "Oh, you must be so very sad right now. You must be so hurt and you don't feel like anybody's hearing you, do you?" That's the moment the knife drops, right?
Yes.
Because all they want is to be seen. And that sometimes, especially teenagers can go through some very traumatic ways to be seen and to be heard.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So breaking up the momentum, what is Lisa grateful for today?
What am I grateful for today? Oh, that's a great question. I am grateful actually for this opportunity, to be honest, to be able to make this book, this very affordable book, available to more people. In my office, I don't have the ability to be able to see people. It's not affordable for everybody. So I really wanted to take the time to sort of document everything so that there is a very applicable way for parents to get all of the information that they need and to navigate through this time in their teenager's life in a way that makes sense to them, in a way that makes them feel connected, and in a way that helps them feel like they're doing their job as a parent as well.
Okay, thank you. And and tell us now about the book specifically.
So the book is really, it's called The B.R.A.V.O Effect, Strategies for Parenting Extreme Teens. And it doesn't really only have to be extreme teen behavior. Really, I think it applies to most teenagers. But if you're the parent in the driver's seat, a lot of that teenage behavior can feel very extreme. There's a whole kind of, continuum of what extreme means. And it just depends on who you are as the parent. I mean, to some parents, it can be extreme if their child gets caught cheating on a test. To other parents, it can mean drug and alcohol use or risky behavior or self-harm. So I think we all have a different experience of what extreme means. But if it's keeping us up at night and we're worried about it and we feel like we don't have the tools we need in order to address it, it's extreme behavior. So the book is really kind of broken up into, I do talk a lot about drug and alcohol use, about suicidal behavior, about when to find a professional. I found, since we're so reliant on the internet, I found that it's sort of been a double-edged sword in a way for parents, because I used to have parents that were very sort of tuned in about how they felt about things, and then they would tell you what they thought, and then we would kind of create, a plan around that. But what I found probably in the last decade is a lot of parents don't have intuition anymore. They go to the internet for everything. They Dr. Google everything and try to find out what the best answer is. And what happens is there's so much information that they get analysis paralysis, and they don't know what to do, and they get overwhelmed. So they just sort of like just avoid it, right? Yes. And I think it can be very, very overwhelming. So one of the things that I think is really important is to just have very sound information that's very simple that you can apply, and then add as you go. But I think it's hard to find simple information. Everything's very complicated when you start looking on the internet. Yes.
And if someone needs to contact you regarding, just to get some consultation, how can they get in touch with you?
So I have a website attached to the book, and it's www.thebravoeffect.com, and you can reach out to me there. And we have all sorts of plans coming up in the very near future. We're going to have a book club. We're going to have some, hours with the expert where you can ask questions and things like that. So it's going to be really exciting. It's all in the works. So feel free to reach out to me and ask me anything that you need to.
Okay, thank you very much. And I have one last question. Do you have one piece of advice for a solo mom, managing her household and struggling with a teenager that may not be in compliance?
Yes. So I think part of, especially with single parents, I think the biggest thing that they will tell me is they don't feel like they ever have enough time for each of their children individually, and much less for themselves, right? They haven't even clipped their toenails in a month, most of them, right? So part of the first thing that I would say to a single mom, which I've worked with lots of single parents, is that the first thing you can do to take the best care of your children is to take good care of yourself.
Amen.
Whatever that means. If that means you sit in your car for an hour and listen to your favorite music before you come in the house, do it. If that means you take a bubble bath and you don't let anyone in your room every single night, and that's your 20-minute ritual, do it. Yes. If that means you put the kids in charge of dinner one night a week and you go out to dinner by yourself, you do it. Whatever those things are. And I'm not talking about hygiene, because I will talk to lots of parents about this and they think hygiene counts. Hygiene doesn't count. I mean like true self-care, things that feed you at the core. And I think having a community of people that understand what you're going through and can sort of kind of like help you, manage what you're going through and support you through it is really, really important. I think I have some very select friends that have been really helpful through my parenting struggles. And believe it or not, even therapists have children that they struggle with. It happens. So I think just having community support and self-care are the two most important things that will help, like, get you ready to be the parent that you want to be. The kids are still going to act out.
Yes.
The kids are still going to give us problems. They just do. That's what kids do. Mm-hmm. It's their job as teenagers to figure out what their boundaries are. And we always figure out how to muster up enough energy to get into the battles with them, to put our foot down, to get in their faces. But it's really hard for us to get the energy sometimes to take care of ourselves.
Yeah.
So I think if you make that part of your, it's non-negotiable. I'm going to do this one thing for myself every day, no matter what's on fire in my house, that you're just taking care of yourself in a very conscious way. It will make a huge difference in how you show up in other moments with your kids.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Thank you very much, Dr. B.R.A.V.O. I appreciate you coming to speak with me today. And I'll put the information about your book in the show notes. And thank you.
Thank you so much. This was a lot of fun.
Yes, it was.